All right, so today we're taking aim at a firearm that's instantly recognizable, whether you're a history buff, a movie fan, or just someone who spent some time at the range.
You talking about the Uzi?
You got it. The Uzi. It's a gun that's, well, it's kind of become this icon, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you see it in movies, video games, and of course it has this really fascinating real-world history, too.
And that's what we're going to unpack today.
The whole shebang.
The Uzi's journey from, well, where did it even start?
You got to go back to the late 1940s to Israel.
A nation just finding its footing.
Exactly. And facing some serious security challenges. That's where Major Uzi Gal enters the picture.
The man behind the legend.
Yeah, he was tasked with designing a new submachine gun for the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF.
So the Uzi wasn't just born. It was born out of necessity.
Absolutely. The IDF needed something compact, reliable, and easy to produce. Something that could be made quickly and cheaply.
Talk about pressure. Designing a firearm for a whole nation.
No kidding. And what Gal came up with was ingenious, really. I mean, the Uzi's design, it's packed with clever features. Take the telescoping bolt, for example.
Telescoping bolt. Now, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Sure. It's where the bolt actually wraps around the barrel.
Instead of behind it, like in most guns.
Right. And that's what allowed the Uzi to be so compact.
Uh-huh. So it's not just a cool name, telescoping bolt. It's like actually descriptive of how it works.
Exactly. And this design choice, it had all these knock-on effects too. By putting the magazine in the pistol grip.
Oh, that's another one of the Uzi signature features.
Right. I mean, you're reloading in a hurry. Your hand naturally goes to your grip.
Yeah.
So intuitive.
Like it's almost instinctive. You don't even have to think about it under pressure.
Precisely. And then there's the use of stamped sheet metal.
Now that sounds like a cost-saving measure.
It was, but it also meant the Uzi was relatively easy to manufacture.
And that was huge for Israel at the time.
Right. Oh, totally. They needed to equip their forces quickly, and the Uzi's design made that possible.
So it was this perfect storm of design brilliance meeting geopolitical realities.
You could say that. And the Uzi's success on the battlefield, it proved Gal's vision right. It was officially adopted by the IDF in 1951.
Okay, so the Uzi hits the ground running. What were its major moments?
Well, it saw action in a lot of conflicts, like the Suez Crisis, the Six-Day War.
Some of the most pivotal moments in the Middle East history.
For sure. And the Uzi kind of earned its stripes in those conflicts.
How did it actually perform? What were its strengths and weaknesses in combat?
Well, for starters, it was a game changer for close quarters combat.
The compact size had to be a huge advantage.
Oh, yeah. Think about clearing bunkers, urban warfare. The Uzi was perfect for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the rate of fire.
I bet it could spit out some lead.
You bet. But of course, no firearm is perfect.
Right, there had to be some trade-offs.
Absolutely. So while the short barrel was great for maneuverability, it did limit the Uzi's range and accuracy, especially compared to, like, longer rifle.
That makes sense. It's a classic trade-off. Compactness for range.
Right. And there were also some issues with reliability in certain conditions. Like during the Yom Kippur War, there were reports of Uzis jamming because of all the sand and dust.
Oh yeah, that desert environment can be brutal on the firearms.
Totally. Highlighted the importance of maintenance, keeping that action clean.
And speaking of the Uzi, spreading beyond Israel.
Well, it really took off. I mean, by the 1960s, the Uzi was being exported to over 90 countries.
Wow. So it wasn't just an Israeli gun anymore. It was a global phenomenon.
Yeah, everyone from militaries to law enforcement agencies, they were all drawn to Uzi's design and its cost effectiveness.
Because let's be real, firearms are expensive, especially for countries trying to build up their defenses.
Absolutely. And the Uzi, it offered a lot of bang for the buck, so to speak.
So the Uzi goes global. Did all these different countries just use the standard Israeli model, or did they start tweaking it?
Oh, they definitely put their own spin on it. Like, the Royal Netherlands Army, they were one of the first to adopt the Uzi, and they requested a version with a longer wooden stock.
Interesting. It's like they were saying, we love the Uzi, but it needs to be a little bit more Dutch.
Exactly. And then you've got the Germans, the Bundeswehr. They started using the Uzi in 1959, designated the MP2, and gave it a special 3-position selector switch.
Of course, the Germans would add their engineering touch. But did the Uzi ever make it to the U.S.?
It did. The U.S. Secret Service actually adopted the Uzi.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it was their standard submachine gun from the 1960s to the early 90s.
Think about that. The Uzi protecting presidents. That speaks volumes about its reliability.
For sure. And, the Uzi's evolution didn't stop there. We saw all these military variants pop up over the years, each tailored for different needs.
Like what? Give me some examples.
You've got the Mini Uzi, a smaller, lighter version.
Okay, I can see the appeal of that.
Then there's the Micro Uzi, even more compact. And more recently, there's the Uzi Pro, a modernized take on the Micro Uzi.
So the Uzi was constantly evolving, keeping up with the times.
Yeah. But what's also fascinating is how its influence extended beyond just official variants. The Uzi's design, it inspired a whole world of clones and copies.
So the Uzi became a bit of a celebrity in the firearm world. Everyone wanted a piece of the action.
Pretty much. We're talking everything from Croatian to Chinese to even Hamas-produced clones. It really shows how influential Gal's design was.
It's like the Uzi became this global brand, transcending national borders.
Yeah, and that's a testament to the Uzi's innovation and its impact.
But while we've been focusing on the military side of things, it's worth noting that the Uzi also made its way into the civilian world.
Oh yeah, big time, especially in the US. But because of regulations, the civilian legal Uzis, they had to go through some changes.
Right, full auto is off the table for civilians in most cases. So how did they make the Uzi civilian-friendly while still retaining its essence? That's something I definitely want to dig into.
We'll definitely unpack that. And we'll also talk about the Uzi's pop culture fame. I mean, this gun's a movie star.
You can't talk about the Uzi without talking about its role in Hollywood. It's almost as if the Uzi itself became a character in some of those action flicks. But we'll save all that for after the break.
So, where were we? Oh yeah, the civilian legal Uzis.
Right, because not everyone who appreciates the Uzi is, running through the jungle or storming a building.
Absolutely. There's a whole world of responsible gun owners out there who might be interested in the Uzi for a variety of reasons.
Target shooting, collecting, maybe even just the cool factor.
Exactly. And the great thing is that even though full-auto Uzis are restricted in the U.S., there are still ways for civilians to experience the Uzi, legally and safely, of course.
And I bet a place like Rad Range, with their focus on safety and education, is the perfect place to do just that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you want to learn about the different types of civilian legal Uzis, get some hands-on experience, and understand the regulations involved, a range like that is invaluable.
I'm sure Rudolph would be more than happy to walk you through the ins and outs of the civilian Uzi experience.
Absolutely. He probably has a whole arsenal of knowledge about the different models, the modifications, and the history behind them.
Speaking of models, what kind of civilian legal Uzis are we talking about here?
Well, there's the Uzi Carbine, for starters. It's semi-automatic only, of course, meaning you have to pull the trigger for each shot.
Right, no spring bullets like you see in the movies.
Exactly. And it has a longer barrel to comply with those U.S. regulations, makes it less concealable, which is a key factor for civilian firearms.
Got it. So it's still an Uzi, but it's been adapted to fit within the legal framework for civilian ownership.
Precisely. And you can find Uzi carbines chambered in a variety of calibers, too, which is kind of cool. Gives you some options depending on your preferences.
Options are always good. What else is out there?
Well, then you have the Mini Uzi Carbine. It's kind of like the little brother of the Uzi Carbine. Still semi-auto, still with a longer barrel, but in a more compact package.
So if you want that classic Uzi look and feel, but in a more manageable size, the Mini Uzi Carbine might be the way to go.
Exactly. And then there's the Uzi pistol. This one's interesting because it's essentially a micro Uzi without a stock. So it's super compact, almost like a large handgun.
Okay, now we're getting into some seriously cool territory. An Uzi pistol. That sounds awesome.
It is. And then they took that concept and modernized it with the Uzi Pro pistol. It's got rails for attaching accessories, an optional stabilizing brace, and a 3-stage safety. Really slick design.
So there's a whole spectrum of civilian legal Uzis out there, from carbines to pistols, each with its own unique features and appeal.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons the Uzi has remained so popular, even in the civilian world. There's an Uzi out there for just about everyone.
And that brings us to, well, what I think is one of the most interesting aspects of the Uzi's story. It's pop culture fame.
Oh yeah, the Uzi's a bona fide movie star.
It's practically synonymous with action movies, isn't it?
You see it everywhere, from classic action flicks to modern blockbusters, video games, TV shows. The Uzi's made its mark on the entertainment world.
But why the Uzi? What is it about this particular firearm that makes it such a popular choice for filmmakers and game developers?
Well, I think part of it is visual. The Uzi just looks cool, right? It has a distinctive silhouette, the compact design, the magazine, and the pistol grip. It's just got this futuristic, almost sci-fi vibe to it.
It's definitely got a look at me factor. You can spot an Uzi from a mile away. instantly recognizable.
Exactly. And then there's the Uzi's reputation. I mean, this is a gun with a real-world history, a gun that's been used in conflicts all over the world. So when you see an Uzi in a movie or a video game, it adds a sense of authenticity, a sense of weight. It's not just some made-up prop. It's a gun that's been through some stuff.
That makes sense. It's like the Uzi brings its own baggage, its own story to the screen.
Right. And I think that's part of what makes it so appealing to filmmakers. It's a gun with a backstory, a gun with a presence.
I'm trying to remember some of the more iconic Uzi moments in movies. There's that scene in Die Hard where John McClane uses an Uzi to, well, do what John McClane does.
Classic. And who could forget Arnold Schwarzenegger wielding an Uzi in Predator?
Oh yeah, that image is burned into my brain. It's like the Uzi became an extension of his character, almost like a signature weapon.
Absolutely. And then you have more recent films like Baby Driver, where the Uzi plays a prominent role in some of those high-octane car chases.
The Uzi just keeps popping up generation after generation. It's become this timeless symbol of action and intensity.
And I think that's a testament to its design. It's a gun that looks as relevant today as it did back in the 1950s.
It's almost like it was designed to be a movie star.
Maybe Major Gal had a crystal ball.
Who knows? But this whole pop culture phenomenon, it raises some interesting questions, doesn't it? Like, does the Uzi's portrayal in media, often in a glamorized way, influence how people perceive firearms in general?
That's a tough one. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Because on the one hand, you could argue that seeing the Uzi used in these fictional, often consequence-free settings could desensitize people to the real-world dangers of firearms.
Yeah, it's like in movies and video games, it's all about the spectacle, the excitement, the real-world consequences of gun violence. They kind of fade into the background.
Right. But on the other hand, the Uzi's presence in pop culture could also spark curiosity and interest in firearms, leading people to learn more about them, maybe even leading them to places like Rad Range, where they can experience firearms safely and responsibly.
That's a good point. It's like a double-edged sword. The Uzi can both glamorize and educate, depending on how it's presented and how people engage with it.
And that's why places like Rad Range are so important. They provide that real-world context, that emphasis on safety and responsibility. It's not just about the cool factor. It's about understanding the seriousness of firearms and the consequences of their misuse.
Absolutely. I mean, you go to a place like Rad Range and you see that it's not just about shooting targets. It's about education. It's about respect for firearms. It's about being a responsible gun owner.
I bet Rudolph instills those values in every interaction he has at the range.
I'm sure he does. He seems like the kind of guy who's passionate about firearms and wants to make sure they're treated with respect.
Now, as we're talking about the Uzi's cultural impact, we also have to acknowledge the controversies that have surrounded it.
Right, because it's not all sunshine and roses. The Uzi has been at the center of some pretty heated debates, especially when it comes to gun control.
And understandably so. Its compact size and firepower have made it a target for criticism. Some people argue that it's just too easy to conceal, or that it's too dangerous for civilian ownership.
And those concerns are valid. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that there have been instances where Uzis have been used in crimes, and those events understandably lead to calls for stricter gun control measures.
It's a complex issue, and it's one that deserves thoughtful discussion and debate. But I think it's important to remember that any firearm, regardless of its design or its intended use, can be misused.
Exactly. It's not about the gun itself. It's about the person behind it, the choices they make.
And that's why education, awareness, and responsible gun ownership are so crucial. It's about preventing those tragedies from happening in the first place.
Well said. And, as we've been talking about all these different aspects of the Uzi, it's clear that this gun has left its mark on the world in so many ways.
It's more than just a firearm. It's a cultural icon, a symbol of innovation, and unfortunately a reminder of the potential for harm that comes with any powerful tool.
It's a complex legacy, for sure.
And I think it's a legacy that deserves to be explored and understood, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely, because ultimately, the Uzi story is a reflection of our own complex relationship with firearms.
It's a story that's still being written, and it's one that we all have a role in shaping.
So true. Now, you mentioned earlier about all those different countries that adopted the Uzi and how they customized it to fit their needs. I'm curious, are there any particularly unique or unusual Uzi variants out there?
Oh yeah, there are some real hidden gems out there. We've talked about the standard models, but the Uzi's versatility, it led to some pretty interesting variations over the years.
What? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, there's the Uzi Carbine, with a standard length barrel. Remember how we talked about the longer barrels being a requirement for civilian sales in the U.S.?
Right, to make them less concealable.
Well, there were a limited number of Uzi carbines produced with the original shorter barrel.
Oh, wow. So those wouldn't have been legal for civilian sale here.
Nope. These were intended for special markets, often overseas customers with different regulations, or maybe for specific military or law enforcement units with unique operational requirements.
It's fascinating how the Uzi could be tailored and modified to suit all these different needs.
And it speaks to the ingenuity of the original design. It wasn't just a one-size-fits-all firearm. It was a platform that could be adapted and evolved.
I wonder if Rudolph has come across any of these rarer Uzi variants in his travels.
Oh, I'm sure he has. He probably has a whole vault full of Uzi treasures, each with its own story to tell.
I bet. You know, it's kind of like a scavenger hunt trying to track down all these different Uzi variations.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the Uzi's global reach and its enduring appeal.
And speaking of unique Uzis, there's also the Uzi fitted with a suppressor.
Ooh, now that's taking stealth to a whole new level. A silenced Uzi.
Right, it's like something out of a spy movie.
What kind of situations would they use a suppressed Uzi in?
Well, you can imagine scenarios where stealth and surprise were absolutely crucial. Special ops missions, maybe some clandestine operations where minimizing noise was essential.
It shows that the Uzi wasn't just about brute force. It could be adapted for finesse and tactical subtlety.
Exactly. And I bet those suppressed Uzis, they have some pretty interesting stories attached to them too, though we might never hear about them.
Yeah, some of those stories are probably locked away in classified files somewhere.
Lost to history, or at least hidden from public view.
Which makes the ones we do know about even more fascinating. It's like piecing together a puzzle, trying to understand the full scope of the Uzi's impact and influence.
I love that analogy. It's like we're on this archaeological dig, uncovering new layers of the Uzi story with each discovery.
And who knows what other secrets are still out there waiting to be found.
Right. There could be a whole vault of Uzi knowledge just waiting to be unearthed, maybe hidden away in some government archive or tucked away in a private collection somewhere.
It's exciting to think about. It's like the Uzi story is still being written, even all these years later.
And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding. It's not just about revisiting what we already know. It's about uncovering those hidden gems, those untold stories that add richness and depth to the Uzi's legacy.
You know, this whole conversation about the Uzi's versatility and his adaptations, it reminds me of a place like Rad Range and how it provides that space for people to experience these firearms firsthand in a safe and responsible environment.
Absolutely. It's like a living museum where you can not only see these firearms, but also learn about their history, their mechanics, and the importance of handling them safely and responsibly.
And maybe even get a chance to shoot some of those rarer Uzi variants, if you're lucky.
Oh, that would be incredible, to hold a piece of history in your hands and experience it firsthand.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the Uzi in a broader context. We've touched on the controversies surrounding it, but I think it's worth delving deeper into those issues and exploring how the Uzi fits into the larger conversation about firearms in society.
That's a crucial point, because the Uzi, despite its popularity and its fascinating history, has become somewhat entangled in debates about gun control, violence, and the role of firearms in our culture.
And that's a conversation that deserves our attention and our thoughtful consideration. So in our next segment, let's tackle those complex topics head on and try to understand the Uzi's place in this broader societal context. So we're back, and we've been on this fascinating journey, tracing the Uzi's evolution from its battlefield beginnings to its civilian adaptations and its undeniable presence in pop culture.
And as we've seen, the Uzi story, it's not just about technical specs and historical milestones.
Right. It's a story that intersects with some really complex social and political issues, especially here in the U.S.
And one of those issues, of course, is gun control. The Uzi, with its compact size and firepower, it's often found itself at the center of these debates.
Yeah, and understandably so. I mean, there have been tragic instances where Uzis have been used in crimes, and that sparks outrage, fear, and calls for stricter gun control measures.
It's a tough conversation to have, but it's one we can't shy away from.
Because the Uzi's, like any firearm, it's a tool, and unfortunately tools can be misused.
And the Uzi's design, while ingenious for its intended purpose, it also raises questions about accessibility and the potential for misuse.
Especially in a country like the U.S., where gun ownership is so deeply ingrained in the culture.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? trying to respect the rights of responsible gun owners while also addressing the very real concerns about gun violence.
And I think this is where a place like Rad Range, with its focus on safety and education, really shines. It's about promoting responsible gun ownership, understanding the laws, and emphasizing the seriousness of handling firearms.
I bet Rudolph has had countless conversations with people about these very issues. He's seen firsthand how education can make a difference.
He probably has a whole arsenal of knowledge about safe storage, responsible handling, conflict resolution, all those things that go beyond just knowing how to shoot.
And it's easy to get caught up in the technical aspects of firearms, the history, the mechanics, but it's important to remember that there's a human element to all of this.
Real people are affected by gun violence.
Yeah.
And real people have a responsibility to prevent it.
It's about fostering a culture of respect for firearms and understanding the potential consequences of their misuse.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of the Uzi, I think the biggest takeaway is that it's not just about the gun itself.
It's about our relationship with firearms as a society, as individuals. It's about the choices we make, the responsibilities we bear, and the conversations we need to keep having.
Well said. And if you're interested in learning more, engaging in those conversations, or simply experiencing the Uzi firsthand in a safe and controlled environment, I highly recommend checking out Rad Range Training and Event Center in Burlington, North Carolina.
It's a place where you can learn from passionate experts like Rudolph, explore the history of firearms, and gain a deeper understanding of the complexities surrounding gun ownership.
It's a valuable resource for anyone who wants to be part of the solution to promote responsible gun ownership and contribute to a safer society. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Uzi.
Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and most importantly, stay safe.